What if I were to tell you that everything you know about mental health is wrong? I went into this industry focusing on mental health, and I got good results with my patients. But when I started focusing on brain health, I got great results. Your brain has the ability to heal itself. They fed us this nonsense in school that the brain was born a certain way and we didn't have the ability to change it. We now know that's not true. And even worse, this focus on medication has made the world look for a quick fix. How do we get here where psychotropics and psychotherapy are the mainstays for brain health? The system is failing you. It's failing your family, it's failing society, and it's time we change the way the world views mental health and turn it right on its ear. Let's have a look at where we're at right now. We say we're in a mental health crisis, but the numbers show us it's beyond that. 41.5% of adults self-report anxiety or depression. 20% of adults report brain exhaustion. 55 million people have dementia, and that number is expected to double every 20 years. 20% of people report having insomnia. It's not just a mental health crisis, it is a brain health crisis. And what are we doing about it? Well, we're throwing money at it. These numbers come from 2019. That's before the pandemic. And $225 billion was spent on mental health. But it's not helping. We're seeing mental health getting worse. We're seeing brain health getting worse. We need to stop looking at brain through a mental health lens. It's time that we looked at brain health issues through brain health. So hi everyone, my name is Dr. Debbie Smers, and I am passionate about changing the way the world views the brain. Just like you, I'm an overachiever. I love adventure. I'm slightly geeky when it comes to education and learning, but everything changed for me one September day. Now, until then, I was wearing that superwoman cape and relishing in it. I was running a successful clinic, speaking nationally to other NDs on anxiety and depression, oddly enough, volunteering as a Girl Guide leader, volunteering at a hospital as a rugby coach. There I am getting an award from the mayor and still finding time to bake my kids' birthday cakes from scratch and be there when they got home from school. And then my daughter seemed to lose her mind. Yep, she dropped out of school in grade 12. Not grade 12, sorry, when she was 12. Did you know the public school system will send a homeschool teacher to your house if it gets that bad? It got that bad. This happened completely out of the blue for us. She was a normal kid until then, and then on that day, it's like she turned into a wild animal. She was initially diagnosed as being in the 95th percentile of anxiety with emotional dysregulation. Yes, the psychologist told me she might kill herself, not because she's depressed, but because she can't handle her emotions. We hid all the knives, and anything that can be used as a weapon. I barely went to work. I would sit in the car each day on the days that I did, mustering up the energy to come inside. I made a hole in the backyard for that superwoman cape. It didn't feel right to me though. I deal with kids and anxiety. Heck, I was lecturing to psychologists on it. This could not be the issue here. It was very humbling to be on the other side of the couch of mental health. Eventually, after many doctors, tears, therapists, and fights, she was diagnosed with PANDAS. And in less than 10 days on antibiotics, she was back at school, and I had my daughter back. It was an infection. The strep, so PANDAS stands for Pediatric Autoimmune Neuropsychiatric Disorder Associated with Streptococcus Infection. Now, when this first happened, I thought, wow, like nobody must know about this. But then I found books written about how infection can cause brain health issues. Books from the 50s, books from the 60s. The information's out there, and yet we're not using it. This is one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about changing the way the world views the brain. We are treating it as a psychological issue, when in reality, anxiety, depression, OCD, Alzheimer's and dementia, stress, they're all brain health issues and need to be treated as such. Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Debbie Smers, and I'm on a mission to change the way the world views brain health. So let's take a little look at how did we get here. Let's look at some myths. First myth, this came out in around the 1950s, 1960s, that fat is bad for us, causing a cascade of issues that I'll get into shortly. We also were led to this theory of serotonin deficiency or chemical imbalance in the brain. This is not a thing. Finally, we were told the brain is fixed at birth and there's nothing we can do about it. It's not. So how did it happen that this war on fat came about? Well, if you look at the chart here, we were steadily starting to increase our sugar intake, mainly through fruits. And then in the 1920s to the 1950s, there was a bit of a flattening when it came to sugar, really before that massive industrial revolution where sugar became so prominent. But it was around this time, around the 1950s, that they started to notice a correlation between diet and health, a correlation between diet and cardiovascular disease, to be specific. And so it's around this time that the sugar industry stepped in. And when big articles were being published, particularly one by Harvard University, they might or might not have paid off some of the scientists to downplay sugar's role and to focus a lot more, pointing the blame on fat and cholesterol. So what this did by blaming fat instead of sugar was cause a generation of people who are now afraid of fat, didn't want to eat fat. But what happens when we want to make palatable food that doesn't have a lot of fat in it? What we do is we add more sugar. And so this slide didn't come out great, but you can see the amount of sugar is higher in low fat, calorie reduced foods. So now we're getting more sugar in our diets, and we know that sugar does have mental health properties. We know that there's an increase in aggression. As a matter of fact, a large study, they took 8,000 juvenile inmates, and this is a large study, it's been 12 different institutions, and they changed some of their more high glycemic food to low glycemic, and what they found was a 47% decrease in antisocial behavior, mainly in aggression. That's huge. So almost a 50% reduction in aggression. Cognitive decline. There was a paper study published in 2019 showing that excess sugar consumption negatively affects verbal memory, impairs memory, and is even linked to dementia. As a matter of fact, we're now calling Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes because we're seeing the correlation between sugar and brain health. Sleep quality, studies showing us that if people who consume sugary foods before bed have worse sleeps and a harder time falling asleep. This diagram is one that many of you are going to feel familiar with if you went to medical school, psychology, psychiatry. Most of us took this in first year university. And what did it show us? It shows us how we get depression and really how selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors work by blocking this channel here, not allowing the serotonin to get taken up again, so we get more serotonin in our body. Why? Because depression is a serotonin deficiency. They told us. Depression is a chemical imbalance in the brain. They told us. That this was just a theory, but it has been going on and introduced a $16 billion industry. And what came out is that this theory is false. It was proven false. So the serotonin theory of depression, this is a systematic umbrella review of the evidence. So what is a systematic review? This is your gold standard. They take all the papers ever published on the topic and they sort it out, so how well the study was done, who they did it on, what the methodology was like, how they interpreted the results. And they looked and they found that there's no such thing as depression due to a chemical imbalance in the brain. There is no such thing as a serotonin deficiency, to the point where I want to read you the exact results they said here. The chemical imbalance theory of depression is still put forward by professionals. The general public widely believes that depression has been convincingly demonstrated to be the result of serotonin or other chemical abnormalities. And this belief shapes how people understand their moods, leading to a pessimistic outlook on the outcome of depression and negatively affecting negative expectations about the possibilities of self-regulation of mood. The idea that depression is the result of a chemical imbalance also influences decisions about whether to take or continue antidepressants and may discourage people from discontinuing treatment, potentially leading to lifelong dependency on these drugs, which we're going to speak about in a minute, is a big problem. Now, most studies, if you've ever read them, they don't give strong decisions in the end. Their strong conclusions usually say, so based on this study, we can see that this and this and this is bad. But before we're going to make a suggestion, we typically want to have more evidence to prove it. Well, this study actually unequivocally says we suggest that the serotonin theory of depression has no empirical evidence, and we stop talking about it because it is known to be false. Now, who cares? What if we believe in the wrong theory? Well, the reason we need to care so much is that it is a real problem when people are taking these antidepressants. They can lead to harm. They can lead to harm. So here's a study that's showing us long-term harms from previous use of selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So again, it's another systematic review. And what did they find? All authors and all the studies that they kept concluded that the drugs had no benefit in the long term. They found that short-term use of antidepressants has a lot of negative effects: irritability, anxiety, panic, emotional flattening, dyskinesia, sexual impairment, and also suicidal thoughts and aggression. It was also found that antidepressants have a stimulation effect. And the problem with this is that instead of just realizing the problem could be the antidepressants, in about 10% of children, what was happening is they were now being diagnosed with bipolar or psychotic disorder and being put on antipsychotic medication, which has long-term permanent brain damage results. And we were seeing this for adults as well. And antidepressants have been linked to an increased risk of dementia. So these are not benign substances. Now, if they're working for you and you truly believe that you're getting a lot of benefit from them, then perhaps they are going to be something you want to stay on. I'm not your doctor, and I need to talk to you individually in this case. There are some reasons that it's believed that they might work. Do you know what the first antidepressant was? The first monoamine oxidase inhibitor was a drug that was made for tuberculosis. So it was a drug they made for an infection in the body. And one of the side effects they found was that it seemed to make people happier. And so the first antidepressant drug was born. So we don't know the mode of action behind it. Yes, there might be something more to how the drug is working for you. So I'm not suggesting you get off your antidepressants, but I am suggesting that we look at a wider lens to understand what's going on. So what do we want to do? We want to measure it, mend it, and then maximize it. The brain is the only organ that we diagnose and treat just on questionnaires. We don't do any other further testing, which really is mind-boggling to me. So I actually have spent, I've gotten a $20,000 device where we can look deeper into what's going on with the brain. We know that the brain produces certain brain waves at all times, and there are normal ways that the brain should be responding in abnormal ways. When we have normal, let's say theta waves, for example, this is when we have creativity and emotional processing and relaxation. This often happens at night when we're sleeping or getting ready to sleep, just between that wake and asleep time. But if there's too much theta, then we often have issues with focus. There might have been a head injury or even learning disorders. Normal alpha waves, this is when we have relaxation and calmness. But if we have high or low alpha waves, we often will see anxiety, depression, insomnia. So we can measure this. There are many devices out there where there are EEGs where we can measure what's happening in the brain. And why is it so important? Why is it so important even just to get a baseline? Well, Tony Robbins said that change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. I'm going to take it a little bit differently. And I'm going to say that change happens when we have measurable metrics and have something to move towards. This is true in so many ways. When we were learning about diabetes in school, they told us that people who have diabetes usually won't change. And that's why dietary suggestions aren't always given, especially at that time. And we just focus right on to medication because that's just what these people are like. That's not true. People are willing to make change if they understand what to do and what they need to take, the steps they need to take to make that change happen. Here is my brain scan. The gray is the first time I did it, the black is the second. So the first test is looking at how much power you can put into the brain in different areas. Now you can see there's not a lot of red going on here, whereas the second time I did it, we're having a lot of red. That means a lot more power is being put on. And you can see that I significantly changed from this spot here where the gray is to this spot here where the black is. So I went from a 13 to a 16. The brain reaction time, this one doesn't change as much. It's not as easy to manipulate. This is more about who we are. Some things we can do, but not as much. And then you can see my physical reaction time improved exponentially. So in my belief, everyone should get a baseline test. If you've had a concussion, there's going to be changes in the brain that you might or might not be compensating for. You might be going back to the pitch or the field too early. We can see cognitive decline when we know where we're starting from, and then we can see how much better we're getting, because who wants to make change when you can't measure it? It's a lot of work. It's a lot of effort, and no one wants to make that effort if we don't know how much better we're getting. Other testing that I might do in my clinic, sure, depending on symptoms that are going on and what might be necessary. So I've created a 4-pillar program to optimize brain health. The first one is to remove the toxins. The second one is to decrease inflammation, optimize the microflora and gut, and then nourish the brain. And so going back to those lab tests, besides just a baseline, what are some of the most common causes of mental health? Some of the most common causes of mental health include inflammation, infection, and trauma. So this is all going to be an immune or an immunological changes. Toxins and detoxification issues, stress, genetics and epigenetics, and then our gut health. There is so much money and so much research showing us how what goes on in the gut is going to affect the brain. So anything going on with your immune system, yes, your brain is going to be affected. The vagus nerve carries signals. We think that there's this tight blood-brain barrier. Just like we can have a leaky gut, we can have a leaky brain, and messages, good and bad, can go in there. We can get toxins. Quinolinic acid is a toxin. So if there's a stress response or even creating a cell danger response, we're going to see changes in there. And then same with stress, infection, antibiotics, poor diet, all of these things can be neurotoxins in the brain, as can heavy metals. There's so many things that we need to look at that might or might not be causing some brain issues. So the first thing you have to be willing to do is to remove what the problem is. If sugar is something that you're getting a lot of, we know that it's a neurotoxin in the brain. And so I want to start the war on sugar, and I wish that had happened in the 1960s. Imagine where our brains would be now. And sometimes it's hard even to spot the sugar. People think that they're having a healthy meal when they're having, say, a yogurt. But if we compare the yogurt, the Danone yogurt, to the Kit Kat bar, they have pretty much the exact same macronutrients. Look at that, 22 grams of sugar in that tiny little healthy yogurt that people are thinking they're taking. And of course, we know that dairy is going to be inflammatory. Sugar has been proven to cause aggression, mood changes, inflammation, microbial changes, and it causes neurons in the brain to shrink. So definitely, I do want to start that war on sugar, but it's not the only neurotoxin that we need to think about removing from our diets. So I'm not even talking about heavy metals here or mold or some of the more detrimental things, but things even like that we're putting in, like alcohol, if it's causing a problem for you, coffee. If you're someone who has anxiety, take it out of your diet. I'm not saying it's forever, but we need to remove some of the biggest issues that are causing the problems. Load up on fats. 70% of the dry weight of your brain is fat. Fat helps with focus, attention. It's anti-inflammatory, and it supports brain function. So what kind of fats? Nuts, seeds, oils, avocado. Do we want to supplement? Sure. Supplementation can be great. We want to get at least 2 grams. So that's a lot of fat, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Let's prioritize sleep. Sleep reduces stress, it decreases inflammation, it solidifies memories, and it enables growth and repair. As a matter of fact, our brain has a detoxification system. It's called the glial detoxification system, and this can only occur while you're sleeping. So if you don't get a good night's sleep, you cannot detoxify your brain. So what do we need to do? Think about your sleep hygiene. Make bedtime earlier. You can do it gradually if you need to. No screen time, at least 1 hour before bed. Think about how the brain and the eyes they're so closely related. What's going into our eyes is going to very much affect your brain. So we know that blue light is great during the day to help us keep awake and feel energetic, but it's so detrimental at nighttime. Melatonin is a hormone that's produced right between your eyes by the pineal gland, and it's so important that we allow our body to get as much melatonin at night as we can. And those screens that we're looking at, even if you have nighttime mode on, it's still going to affect your hormones. It's still going to affect your sleep, which is going to affect your brain. What about supplements? Well, remember we wanted to measure it, mend it, maximize it. So making sure that we have all the nutrients the brain needs is paramount for optimal brain health. And magnesium is one of the things that we're most deficient in. So magnesium is depleted by stress, and it's necessary to make our neurotransmitters. So just because I said that brain health isn't due to chemical imbalances, getting good, healthy, functional neurotransmitters still is important. And guess where most of your neurotransmitters are made? In the gut. 90% of your serotonin is actually made in the gut. Magnesium modulates stress. It's one of my favorite nutrients to have around. It helps with almost everything. You have a headache, magnesium might help. Cramps, magnesium. Stress, poor sleep, having a hard time getting to sleep, magnesium can do the trick. So definitely one of those things you want to think about having in your pantry. Another one is fish oil. We mentioned loading up on fats, but getting the omega-3 particularly can be beneficial to the brain. Some people think that we want to get about at least a 1-to-2 ratio between EPA to DHA. And for depression, it looks like a 60% EPA to DHA is even more effective. It can help with focus and attention, can help with skin. But we want to get a pretty good dose, so 2 grams a day. A lot of people are on these gummies lately, and I will read the bottle. And if you want to get 2 grams per day, particularly the EPA, in some of these, I was looking at these gummies, that would be 20 gummies a day. So just imagine the amount of sugar you need to take. So I know gummies are yummy, but you need to get 2 grams of EPA a day to do what we're looking for. So that's probably 6 to 8, if not 10 of the gummies you're looking at. Well, we've measured it, then we mended it. Now it's time to maximize it. I love technology. Body wellness, this is one place where technology has really shined, and it's amazing how many people aren't utilizing it to its fullest. Let me show you some of my favorite things. I've created an entire wellness studio, which is primarily focusing towards brain. First, we have the Brain Tap, which uses binaural beats, light therapy, using guided meditation. It really helps with sleep, stress, mental health. If they say it gets you into a relaxed state, that would take about 20 years of meditation alone. I have a device called the NanoV. This device helps with cellular metabolism. It helps with protein folding and mitochondrial support. And brain and cellular optimizing. Pulse electromagnetic frequency, this is helping with inflammation. As a matter of fact, some hospitals are actually using it now for depression. We see a decrease in the stress response and the brain response. It increases blood flow, which is extremely important when it comes to brain health. Red light therapy helps with energy, cellular optimization, mitochondria. Vibration plates actually do have a place when it comes to brain health, as well as bone health. And then heart math. Heart math gives us biofeedback, so we can actually understand what we're doing and how it's changing our body. A study looking at heart rate variability showed us just how much understanding how your body's responding, learning a few tips and tricks can change the way we are. So this was looking at 5,500 people over 6 to 9 weeks that were using heart math, but it's just a biofeedback and breathing techniques. And there was a decrease in depression by 60%, in fatigue of 50%. So again, looking at it as a brain health issue, not just a mental health issue, but changing support with focus, listening, sleep, and anxiety. So really, you want to cherish your brain. It's your most complex organ, and we want to really nourish it. So that's me. As I mentioned, I have my 4-step program on optimizing your brain, and I would love to answer any questions, so contact me directly. You can reach me at natliving.ca. My Instagram handle is at Dr. Debbie Smrz, so at DrDebbiesMRZ, and I would love to hear from you.